Good morning, everybody. Here yet another morning walk. Grateful to see another day. Still be able to see, to smell, to hear, to walk, to just be able to connect really with God and get wisdom and just learn by being with Him. And that's what I want to talk about today, is the importance of the habits and why I still do the habits. In the beginning, the habits were given to me by my mentor, who is a multimillionaire. And the reason I approached him is because I was chasing money, like I was chasing women. And I thought if I just followed the method, basically, of what he did, or copied what he did, I would be able to be in his shoes one day. Because, every time I did what someone else did, or copy what someone else did that had the results I wanted, it's usually where I ended up, in that same place or pretty close. But what he actually helped me do, which is very genius, is the habits that he told all of us to implement. Waking up before 5, counting our macros, working out twice a day in the beginning to build the discipline, no vices, basically removing the things that we were doing as opposed to adding. Is the people that stuck with it, like I did, like very few others did, and we actually grew from it, is that we actually grew a connection to God. So like I said, when I was doing it, I thought it was all mental, physical. I was constantly pushing myself mentally, trying to find reasons to keep waking up. I was posting everything online, sharing it, and I knew that it was helping other people. I got approached by other people because my physique was getting better. My discipline was obviously getting better. I was working out twice a day, every day. My macros were on point. I had the best physique I had in my life. And eventually I hit a point where I capped out, where I was operating at my best, but there was still something missing. There was still an element where I was not growing, and I felt that, and I was constantly overthinking, trying to find maybe another method or someone else to follow, or changing ways to get, a result out of that. But thankfully, at that point as well, I was getting closer to God, started reading the Bible, and I never put or understood the proper way to connect with Him. I obviously believed in Him and had faith, and was getting power from His teaching. But when I met my coach, who's now like my spiritual brother, we speak every day, and he's helped me grow so much in these areas, that he helped me see that the spiritual side was something that wasn't working. I was doing the habit of reading and connecting, you could say, and adding that as another habit, but I wasn't really authentically living or understanding what I was reading. And what I mean by that is, everything is spiritual. Everything is spiritual in terms of, do you think who you are is your mind and your thoughts and your ego? You've been programmed that way since you gained consciousness, and so did I. But when I realized that who you actually are was, or is, your spirit, and that is what you had access to most when you were a child. Basically no fear, being able to be who you want, have endless possibility, endless faith. And over time, as you grow older and older, you get all these fears and stuff put on you, and that basically is your mind trying to construct the way that you see yourself, or help you organize the way you see yourself. But what that actually does, funny enough, is your mind and also your ego live in the same place. And your ego is also a self-construct of something that isn't real, an illusion, just like fear, which your mind creates. And I was living in a place, especially after my journey with women and, using my ego basically most of my 20s. I was always living in my head and thinking that was who I actually was. But what he helped me see and realize was that my spirit was completely gone. In terms of who I authentically was, I was not able to share. I was not able to let my spirit lead, which is who you authentically are. You're not your mind or your thoughts. Or who you authentically are is your spirit. And when you begin to remove, like I always say, the thinking which causes you to go after some goal because you want a feeling behind that, when you start to remove that addiction you have to your mind and your thoughts and your ego, especially the feeling that your ego tries to give you when you chase a goal or go after something external because you want a feeling from that. That's the only reason you go after something. There's no certainty that you're ever going to get it, but what you do is you set a goal and you go for it because you think it's going to give you a feeling that you don't have right now because you're in lack, and think that something outside of yourself and adding it is going to make you feel more fulfilled. And that is the reason that I embarked on the journey for 4 years of attracting women, picking up women. That's essentially what I looked up when I had my heart broken, my world turned around by my first ex-girlfriend. I Googled how to pick up women because I never had that area figured out. I never knew how to actually attract someone. All the previous relationships I had were all, you can say, basically circumstances or results of circumstances of basically women just putting themselves in my path. I mean, I didn't have to do much, so it was more something that wasn't proactive. And what this caused was I didn't have control of that area the way I wanted. And when I lost that first partner, my life basically turned upside down, because when everything that you've had in one area is just given to you, you can say by God, but you don't know how to actively get it yourself. The thing of teaching you how to fish as opposed to giving you fish. I was given fish, but I didn't know how to actually fish. And what I did was it destroyed my confidence and put me in a place where I was dependent on something external to happen that was never my control. So that put me in a very bad downward spiral. I got to a place where I was basically depressed, thinking suicidal thoughts. And what got me out of it was, I see now God, but I at that moment thought it was ego. So what I did when I was at my lowest point was I made a decision that no other person, no other woman was going to put me in a place where I had no control, or in a place where I was that low that I would just get depressed, have suicidal thoughts, and put me in a position like that because I lost somebody that was not even good for me. But it was all a lesson. And essentially I activated emotion to get me out of that. I credit it to ego back then, because my ego was what caused me to keep pushing and pushing past the days that were hard and that I didn't want to basically go on this journey. And my ego was always searching for a feeling from this whole journey of So basically making that decision, I committed 3 years using my ego to learn how to attract women. And I did this sober. I never took a drink for the first year or two going out. So imagine a depressed person, suicidal thoughts, going up to women and trying to attract them with no drink, no drugs, just me as a person and my character and who I was. And in the beginning, I believe I was with God because I was doing this with the only intention in mind of actually growing my character and being able to attract someone based off who I was, not using money, not using, alcohol like most men use, liquid courage or drugs, trying to lure women with drugs. It was me pushing through all my fears, all these limiting beliefs I had, and every weekend, essentially, sometimes even 3 days a week, but not missing a weekend, going out and approaching women. It could be at clubs, it could be during the day at malls, subway stations, whatever it was, but essentially getting over that fear and getting over those limiting beliefs I had. Eventually, when I got proficient at it, ego came in and it became lust, because I started to add, social media to it, trying to get validation online, posting all these things I had with women. I eventually started drinking more and getting into drugs, and basically I lost control because I started to validate myself more with what other people thought of the women I was with than how I was actually growing, or if I was growing. But at that point, I essentially reached my cap, so I started to validate myself externally and grow my ego. But the reason I say all this is because when you embark on a journey like the one I have, you eventually hit a point where your mental capabilities or physical capabilities can no longer push you, or you don't find the motivation. And what you'll need is either one, you do it for ego like I did and destroy yourself, because you start to do it for validation, for things outside of yourself, for things outside of your control that you think you're controlled because your ego thinks you control everything, or you do it for God. And the reason why I've been able to keep up these habits and push myself and post online and can't miss is because I would essentially be ruining my connection with God. When I wake up before 5, when I track my macros, when I go to the gym, suffer physically, when I stay away from vices, stay away from lust, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, gambling, smoking, when I stay away from bad environments, people that are stuck in ego and trying to always add, consume, acquire, chase, are hungry for something outside of themselves, usually money. When I stay away from things like that, my connection to God and me being able to feel God trying to speak through me and signal me through my conscience is at its ultimate high. So when I say at this point that I can't miss, it's because me missing a wake up time or adding back a vice for something would literally, I'd rather die than do that. And that is because I've had the opposite. I've had the opposite where I was running through ego, which is the devil using you, to validate myself with something I got proficient at through faith and my own mental discipline and capabilities. But eventually you could say that that result I allowed to consume me, and instead of using it for something positive, like maybe teaching others, I did at one point teach other men how to attract women. I did it for myself. I essentially used what I got good at and used it for my own self-validation, trying to inflate my own ego, trying to perceive or make others perceive me bigger than what I actually was. And it was all stemming from lack and not Not understanding that the ego that I was constructing, or the things that I was posting online to get validation from people, and I thought was actually influencing people or getting attention from people, it was the wrong kind of attention. It was actually, I see now, almost like pity. I thought it was like jealousy, but it was something that just eventually self-imploded, because when you work for the devil like that with your ego and just try to add more and more and show people and validate and like, oh, I'm better than you or whatever it is, you eventually get a point where you hit that max, and the devil, whenever he's done his job with you, will just leave. You know, there comes a point where his job has done his job with you, and you can just basically, he'll drop you off and you're left. But when he drops you off, essentially, or he's done his job with you, you're worse off than we were before. You have all this lack and emptiness and all these things that you were working for that were fake. When you work for ego and you work for that illusion that you're trying to build through some kind of, essentially, like mental basic illusion, all these things you're working towards, which is your ego, it evaporates. So all this work you're putting in to trying to show other people or validate yourself externally, it's work for something that's invisible, that you think is real, but once it implodes and you realize it's all fake and a facade and an illusion, you realize that you're working essentially for nothing. You're working for basically dust and particles, it feels like, and not actually something solid. And when I realized that was 2 years ago. I was coming out of a relationship that actually grew me a lot, and I missed that person, but didn't realize it, didn't process it fully. So I ended up being another person, you could say a rebound, very much in lack, and didn't have any power within myself. So I was supplicating to anything that she wanted, because I wanted that person beside me, taking her on trips, going to visit her. She was from Argentina, to a point where I was in her lifestyle and her reality. She wasn't in mine. So, her reality was parties every weekend, music festivals, DJs, drugs, and I got lost in that. And eventually there came a point where we were out. It was pitch black in the club. This music was going on. Everyone was on some kind of substance. I, at that point, was heavy into pills, the ecstasy pills. And we would do that every time we went out, literally every time we went out, because we were both in a place where we weren't fulfilled within. So we thought a drug or some music or going out would fulfill us. And essentially, at that point, we were out, and like I said, pitch black. I was coming off the high, you could say, the come down. Everyone else was still kind of, I don't know, whatever it was. But at that point, I felt the devil, the energy of where my life was going. I just felt total darkness. I saw people escaping their lives tremendously. I saw a multimillionaire I respected when I met him, just basically throwing everything away, just escaping his life. All her friends as well, her herself, her encouraging me to do it because, that's all they knew. When you get to that point and you realize that your ego literally only takes you to darkness when you work for it, because at that point I was still very much posting my lifestyle, posting her, posting, where I was going, travels, stuff like that, trying to post this lifestyle, trying to validate myself with it. When I hit that point, I realized that this is all basically for nothing. I was working for darkness. The ego is basically just for darkness. And essentially, the devil, almost like a fortune teller, put a globe in front of me and said, this is where your life was going. And it literally felt like I was at the top of a roller coaster. And he was showing me that when you go down 90 degrees, there's no tracks, which means it's just basically death. I, at the moment, not knowing anything spiritual or understanding that everything is spiritual and, you know, your spirit, I thought it meant little death, like I was gonna die, and I took it that way. But I see now it was a spiritual death, essentially, meaning when you work for your ego, the spirit, who you actually are, like I said, the kid, the inner kid you have, the kid that was born with no fear, abundance of possibilities, you know, being able to be guided, not with thinking, but just his energy or her energy, if you're watching this as a girl. That essentially is what gets killed when you work for ego, because your ego is using your fear as fuel. It's not using any faith, it's using fear. So when I had gotten good with the whole thing of women and fear, not knowing back then, but knowing now, fear of being alone is what drove me to go on the journey of women. I thought back then, when I was in that place super low, that if I didn't figure this out, I would be alone the rest of my life. So that deep fear of, you know, having that is what drove me to dedicate all this time, 4 years, about 5 years to it. And eventually when I got that and got good, there was another fear of not being seen that drove me to post everything online. I had this fear of, like, you know, not being important or not being seen, and that was mostly by the person that hurt me, but we were not in contact at the point, so I needed the world to see what I had done. And that is why I exposed myself to the world the way I did on Instagram. Like I said, posting ridiculous things for validation. I'll post me walking with women on the streets, all my opinions on being single versus being married. I thought being single was the true strength of a man, and if you had a girlfriend, you were basically a pussy, and all this stuff. And, like, you know, you don't need women need you, all this stuff. And it was very sad. I didn't see it back then, but it was all driven by ego, and I was looking for attention by that, and thought I was in a place of power, but definitely in a place of weakness, a lot of weakness. And basically that was just driven by that fear, like I mentioned. And eventually, when everything came crumbling down, I realized that I was in a place where the last 4 or 5 years of that life were driven by fear. And it was like you had to start all over. And all I knew at that point that I had built was something, like I said, was just dust and particles. It wasn't real. I built an ego that I constructed that came crumbling down. Literally, it felt like in seconds. And I was back to who I thought I was, which was my mind. But my spirit was still there. And God guided me through that path to basically disintegrate that ego and start fresh, start new. So that is why I invested heavily in myself, all these mentorships, all these things to grow me, and all the money I was spending on on women or drugs, whatever it was that they wanted for me to be with them, I put that into myself. And that's when I began to grow like crazy, but I still had this lack that was still there. And at that point, I had basically achieved my journey with the relationships thing. That's why I have no interest in, you know, going out anymore, chasing women like a lot of men do. I basically got my fix, you could say. But where the lack in one area was, I went to another area, which was financial, because at that point I threw everything to the side to pursue this. So I had no interest in career, I only had interest in how many women can I sleep with in 1 year, and what are the ways I can do that with as minimal effort for my career as possible. So I had that lack in that area that I saw, and I basically allowed that to basically infest with chasing money. So I did that for a couple of years, invested in mentorships for that, and eventually I landed on my mentor now. But basically, all the mentorships I invested in, the biggest one being the Tate mentorship. I wanted things faster. Things weren't coming fast enough, so I invested in this last one because I saw someone that spoke Spanish. I was in a Bugatti, and I said, hey, there's some similarities here. He must be Spanish, like myself, and the other guy I saw that had that financial success like that. So I invested, and soon enough, like I said, he gave me the habits that I needed, and I thought it was for money, but it was to get me to the spot I am now, to finding and accessing the true part of yourself that can't be taken from you, and that is eternal, no matter what happens, and that is your spirit. And it is also the only thing that will help you push past your mental and physical capabilities. Like I said, these habits would not have been maintained if it wasn't for spirit basically guiding me and allowing me to do this. There was times where I was doing everything on a little sleep, a little rest, and if it was just me mental and physically trying to battle that and get over that, I would have quit a long time ago, because that's where your ego comes into play. When you're using your mind, it's you against the devil, where he resides, which is your ego, which is all fake as well. So that's why I was able to access this unlimited discipline, you could say. But it comes from your spirit. It comes from who you actually are. Who you actually are is not what you think or the stories you tell yourself in your mind of who you are or who you could be, because that's ego trying to construct itself in your mind. And like I said, that's all dust particles. It's all something that's completely fake and not even real, not eternal. It's something that will come and go because it's a tool the devil uses to complete a job with you and try to promote himself and live through you. And like I said, when people ask me, why I'm on this journey, that I'm crazy for being on this journey, the way I think and stuff like that, you now know fully why I've transcended the whole ego thing, because I lived in that for 4 or 5 years. And like I said, put everything, all my mental, physical resources to build that up. And then it all came crashing down literally one night in Buenos Aires. And from then on, I realized that was not what was gonna basically give me the next, that's not gonna give me the next level of my life. And it's also something that is not stable. You're building a foundation on sand, literally, instead of rock. Your foundation of ego that you're building things on because you're going after some goal, because you want to feel some way or prove something to someone, or show the world that you're something. That's all your ego, literally guiding you to build in his kingdom, which is the kingdom of literally death, spiritual death. But when you decide to build for your spirit, or live through your spirit, you don't build through your spirit, but live through your spirit, you build through the kingdom of God, which is eternal. No matter what happens, and you stay on the course, you can't go wrong. It's something that goes with you after this life. It goes with you after this life. It transcends this life. It transcends all rules of this life, all the physical, mental rules, things of the spirit, things of, God, things that will help you accomplish things that you're not able to do yourself. Because everything is energetic and spiritual. It is all transcending. Things you think, you can't think your way into the next level. It's honestly feeling your way and removing the things, the noise that doesn't get you the signal, which is God trying to guide you. So that is how you're able to basically attain unlimited discipline and unlimited power energy, is by giving your power over back over to your spirit. Like it was because at one point, like I said, you were a kid. You weren't able to gain consciousness of how things work. You weren't thinking of the next step or your fears or where you wanted to go or, what people thought of you or anything like that. You just knew the day, grateful for the day, grateful to wake up, experience life. And all you knew was endless possibility, no fear. The people that instilled fear in you were adults. And like I've heard before, and this is a perfect quote, children are the perfect creation of God and adults are the perfect creation of the devil. Because one is full of faith and endless possibility, which is a child and his spirit. And the other is full of fears, limitations, and that is the adult, which is the devil. The devil just gives you fears and limitations. It doesn't give you faith or possibility or what you could actually be. So that is how I transcended the whole ego trip that I was on, because I went so far into it that God showed me what the path was, or where the end was, which was death. Literally, spiritual, could even be physical, but it led me to the path that actually matters, which is spiritual. And being able to, you can actually live through your spirit, and that is removing and not adding. So removing the vices, removing the things that disconnect you, food, women, whatever it is. You'll know your devils. You'll know the things that the devil tries to use to get you to his side through ego. And when you do that, your life changes. I promise you, your life, if you right now are full of ego, it changes completely when you trust in that. That basically, briefly, is a story of how I went from using one source of power, which is fake and leads nowhere, which is ego, to using another source of power, which is eternal, which transcends everything, space, time, reality. It's the most real, and that is spiritual, and how that is the true path and the path that will lead you to where you're supposed to be, because God thinks above you, not your mind, not your flesh, not your body. Know where you're supposed to be, and the path is already laid out. But your mind wants to think and wants to have control, and that is where the devil lies. And he uses his ego because he wants control and understanding of where it is, because he wants credit for putting you somewhere. But like I said, that somewhere is for his benefit, not yours. And his benefit is using fast external results to get people on his side, people that are in fear, people that are in lack, people that need self-validation, people that are not fulfilled, people that want fast results and fast things, like I did at one point. It's because you are not fulfilled within. You are in lack, and you think getting something fast, money, girls, cars, lifestyle, whatever it is, love, even the feeling of love, you want that fast because, I need that feeling. That is all stemming from fear and a lack of fulfillment. And the more you listen to that ego and fasting, the more you work and guide yourself to the devil. And I've been there, and like I said, it just leads to death, and that's why I'll never go back. So this path of living a lifestyle where you're removing all that dependency on the external, removing enough to the point where you just connect and you get guided, and give faith to others in the process based off your lifestyle, because you're not adding anything, you're removing and getting power from that, as opposed to trying to add, a method or this or that to add something external to make you feel this way. You're literally working from the inside out, not the outside in. And that breeds crazy faith within yourself and also other people that begin to understand that everything is backwards. When you work for ego, you work backwards. You work outside in. And when you work for spirit, you work inside out. You understand where you're feeling, where you are spiritually, and everything else comes as a consequence of that. And it's the hardest path. Some will say it's the slowest, but it's the one, like I said, is the most eternal. So that is the message for today. Something told me I need to share that. It's God. Because now I see more than ever that people are tricked into the fast results, like I was. Fast life, fast everything. And they'd rather get something that they think they need right now, tomorrow even, as opposed to building the person within that attracts it as a consequence of their character. Your character comes before everything, and that is your spirit, who you are truly, as opposed to this construct you're trying to make, which is your ego. And it all comes from you thinking you add something external, like some money or, I don't know, something material, and you think that builds you internally. That actually destroys you internally. And I've been living proof of that. So you will likely have to go on this journey yourself and destroy that ego somehow, or you give full faith to God and remove. And it's the hardest thing you'll do because you've been programmed to live through ego your whole life, because that's the easiest way to control you. And society can control you if you live through ego, but you don't see it. And you remove all that in faith and see how God begins to bless you with everything, but most importantly, peace. Because when you live through ego, you live in fear, you live in lack, and you're constantly stressed because you need something external to validate you. You need, something of this world, which is, like I said, not real. The things that are the most real you don't see. But that is a message. The growth you have on this journey is crazy. And like I said, the most eternal thing you'll do. So